Hey everybody, Chris Lopez here from Procurement IQ. Thank you so much for joining here today. Just want to make a quick video on one of the headlines that is really spreading across procurement and sourcing teams, and that is the labor shortage that we're seeing across the board right now in the US, whether it be client services jobs, fast food, really in a lot of different sectors, we're seeing the labor shortage have an explicit impact. So I want to dive into some of what we're seeing in here, and then I have my analyst Ben on the line, who's going to give us a little bit of the deeper knowledge here as far as how this is affecting procurement and sourcing departments specifically. So hopefully now you can all see I'm sharing the Procurement IQ category report on call center services, which is one of the major areas we're seeing this labor shortage have an impact. And when you're looking at things like buyer power score, wanting to understand the leverage as a procurement or sourcing professional you have, this is going to be a major factor right now, as any of these large headlines are in terms of affecting the near-term volatility. And so with a little visual on the buyer power score here, and of course, if I scroll down to recent developments, we're seeing a warning trend specifically on the shortage of workers in these customer-facing roles, and we're seeing this in a lot of different places. So now I'd love to throw it, Ben. Can you jump in here and tell me just what is the deeper layer here? I mean, what is the explicit effect that this labor shortage is having, whether that be in call center services or elsewhere, as far as where these jobs are important?
Sure, Chris, that's a great question. We're seeing the labor shortages percolate through a lot of sections of our reports, just as it's sort of percolating through most of our economy at this point. In fact, nearly 90% of 1,200 employees surveyed by the Society for Human Resources Management said they've been struggling to fill open positions this summer. So we're kind of seeing it everywhere. I'd say in terms of this particular report, call center services, we're really going to see it in rising wages. And I'm seeing that in a lot of our reports lately.
Let me jump over to the wages side as you say that.
So yeah, we're talking specifically about average wages. The particular driver that we're tracking here is for telemarketing and call service center workers. And we're seeing this across a lot of our reports. Wages that would have been growing negatively last year, many of them are now growing positively this year. So 2018 to 2021, we're looking at a 2.1% average growth rate over the last 3 years. And that's going to slow a bit over the next couple of years. But regardless, that is a pretty fast growing wage rate in this market. And it's going to have pretty significant effects across the market, especially for buyers as it pushes prices upward.
And so, Ben, that's a really interesting point, especially on how it's affecting cost structures and sort of even the difference over time for various vendors. So I scrolled right up here to look at the cost structures for suppliers here, and we even see a little bit of that fluctuation here, 2020 to 2021. You see wages rising, and a few other areas where sort of that differences is being made up. Can you give me sort of the extra layer as to what we're seeing in here in this cost structure table?
Yeah, so you definitely hit the nail on the head that wages are taking up a larger chunk of suppliers' cost structures. And on the left side, you can kind of see the purchases are doing so as well. In this market, that's going to be things like the price of computers have been rising, networking technology, a lot of production issues in those sort of underlying supply chain components. And then in the middle, the overhead area, that's where the cost structure has been taking up a little bit of the slack. So maybe some of these suppliers have been able to reduce some of their overhead costs by having employees work at home. They don't have to provide them lunches in the office anymore, that sort of thing. So it's definitely something that we can see over time in the last year or so that our new report standard shows us, and it can sort of clarify that a little bit.
And you can really see some of that movement in the structure here. And as you mentioned, the purchasing of laptops, I can imagine as call centers have gone somewhat remote in the last year. That's kind of why you see the changes in purchasing versus overhead here, kind of as well as the fluctuation in wages. Just a lot of interesting movement within which, as a procurement professional, if you're not communicating with your vendors in that space on how they're changing, how they're adapting to that, there's no better time to check in on that than right now, right as you're watching this. Shoot them an email if you don't already understand how that's taken effect, because maybe they have found efficient ways to go remote or not, but understanding what that office environment even looks like right now from a call center perspective must be crucial in approaching that contract.
Absolutely. You really hit the head on the nail on the head when you said changes in wages too, because all of these rapidly changing market conditions are leading to increased volatility in wages. And that does take us back sort of to the recent development that we've been talking about, which is that shortages in customer facing roles are really beginning to negatively affect suppliers in this market. So at the top of the recent development, we say this is a warning trend. This is a negative trend that is occurring in this market.
Yeah, to take us to just the overall components of the buyer power score, because you see that where as you look at the recent developments as a whole and where they're trending for this market, it's dragging down. You're seeing something where normally call center service is a little bit higher than zero point 0.7. You can see that dip over time, and really even the difference between the 0.2, the 1.2, and the zero point 0.7 here. A lot of that does just come down to recent development. So that math even lining up fairly nicely, but shows you there to take a little bit of pause and maybe buy later, as a specific action as far as what at least the market information is telling us in the call center space specifically. Man, so that's excellent stuff. So, Ben, thanks so much for walking me through some of this, especially giving us that extra layer of detail. Really appreciate that. For everyone watching, thanks so much for joining. Here's Procurement IQ. We're trying to dive into those insights to give you some actionable information that you can take forth on your projects and strategies. So we're making more of these, but for right now, Chris Lopez and Ben Kepenick from Procurement IQ. Thanks so much, everyone. Let's catch you on the next one.